Hi everyone, I'm Chef Susie with Escoffier Online, and this morning we are going to be making a very classic cake that's super moist. It's the olive oil cake. If you've never made it before, you're going to love it. It's super delicious, and even though it lends its name to olive oil, which is typically used in a savory application, this cake is nice and sweet. It's a super great dessert. You're going to love it. You can make so many variations on this. You're just going to be exploring olive oil cake maybe all summer long. So knowing that, let's go ahead and get started. So just a few ingredients in this cake. It's a really loose batter. Just keep that in mind. If it looks kind of loose to you, it's supposed to be like that. You can mix the whole thing by hand, really easy to make. I've got some granulated sugar that I measured out earlier, and I'm going to be putting some orange zest in the sugar. Then I'm going to be adding my liquids and then my dry ingredients last. I have my all-purpose flour, my baking powder, and my salt all sifted together in a separate bowl. Let's go ahead and zest some of our orange. I like these microplaners. I definitely recommend this if you don't have one in your kitchen. You'll find it very handy. It's great for using for zesting. You can use it for chocolate, you can use it for cheeses, anything fine. Be careful not to get your fingers too close to the plane. It is really sharp. And this is another one of these things that you don't want to put it in the sink with some debris on it. Make sure that you're washing it off very soon after using it, or if you don't have time, soak it, get it in some water, a glass of water or something, because if things dry on here, they're very hard to get off, like the chinois, anything fine like this. Make sure that you get it in some water right away. Okay, so I've got some orange zest, about 2 tablespoons full. These olive oil cakes are great if you use lemon as well, so either one that you like. I'm going to be finishing the cake today with some orange marmalade, so I'm just going to be reinforcing that flavor with some orange zest here that I just zested. And I'm going to just be mixing that in my granulated sugar, and then we're going to go ahead and put the wet ingredients in. You can also pulse this together in a food processor. If you see some chunks, you can kind of just get in here and rub this in with your hands a little bit. This is just going to help distribute the zest in the sugar. It's going to be giving this a great flavor. Like I said, lemon is nice too, especially this time of year, the Meyer lemons, which have a very distinct flavor to them. A lot of people often say that they have a sweetness to them. Those are great for this cake as well. So just keep all of that in mind, and please let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, this is super simple. You can make so many variations to a recipe like this. You're just going to love it. Okay. So let's talk about some other variations which you would be adding probably to the sugar mixture. This is an Italian favorite with the olive oil. Thyme is great. I've got some fresh thyme here. And also some rosemary is great to add to this too. So just keep that in mind. And when you're using your rosemary, I would look for these little tender stalks. They're a little easier to chop than the more woody ones. If your stalks are really woody, make sure to take the green leaves off and chop that up and leave the little woody stalks behind. But this is a great complement to the cake. But today we're just going to be making the traditional orange olive oil cake. So knowing all that, let's finish up here, okay? Next we're going to be adding our eggs to our sugar and orange zest mixture. This is nice. It's super easy. You don't need a mixer. You can mix all this by hand. And please let me know if you have any questions. You really don't want this batter to get too fluffy or too aerated, so it could fall apart easily. Okay, so we've got our eggs. Next we're going to put our milk, which is room temperature. Make sure this is room temperature so it doesn't seize the oil at all. And then lastly, we're going to be adding our olive oil. Any kind of olive oil that you like will be just fine. What you can do also too, if you have another nut oil in your kitchen, perhaps pistachio, you could substitute a little bit of that oil in the recipe, and it's just going to give it a little bit more of a distinct flavor and color too. So next goes in our olive oil, which is going to add a lot of flavor and some moisture to this cake. Since this batter is thinner, it's going to be a heavier cake. It's not going to be so light and fluffy. What's going to leaven this cake would be the eggs and the baking powder. We don't have any other leaveners in here. We're not whipping any air, so it's not going to be a light cake. It's going to be a little bit dense, but it's going to be really moist. You're just going to love it. I highly recommend it. We're going to be making an 8-inch cake today, but you can make this in small bundt pans or even your cupcake tins. We have a little piece of thyme in here that I dropped in, which would be okay, but we'll get it out because it's kind of floating around in there. So please let me know if you have any questions. This is the baking powder, the salt, and the all-purpose flour, which I sifted earlier, and I'm just going to be mixing this in. And this is pretty much it. It's just a real super easy batter to make. This is great any time of day. It's nice with breakfast or lunch or even a dinner dessert. We're going to be doing a plated dessert, which you could serve in a restaurant, especially an Italian restaurant. This would be nice. This cake is a real crowd pleaser. I definitely recommend it. And people will say olive oil, but it just gives it a lot of moisture, it gives it some density, and it gives it a very, very unique flavor. And please let me know if you have any questions so far on the olive oil cake. Okay, so our batter is done. It's nice and smooth. I've just got some speckles from my Zest. I'm just going to scrape the sides. Since this is a thin batter, you're not going to want to fold any nuts in here unless you want them in the bottom of the cake, because they're definitely going to fall. If you put some fine nuts, they might suspend a little bit, but a lot of that is going to go to the bottom, which is pretty unique. It would be okay with me, but that's what will happen. Okay, so the batter is smooth, and I'm just going to be turning this into an 8-inch pan. I'm going to fill it just a little bit more than halfway. And I've got some parchment on the bottom. This cake has a tendency to stick a little bit, so once you spray it, always put some parchment in the bottom. You can also butter and flour your pan as well. That's going to work just fine. So we're going to go ahead and pour our batter in. And since this is a loose batter, got a lot of liquid in here, it's going to take a little while for this little 8-inch cake to bake. I would say leave it bake between 35 and 45 minutes. Just kind of leave it in the oven. It's going to turn a nice golden brown color, kind of almost like a medium brown color. And it's going to start to come away from the sides a little bit. It has a tendency to be a little sticky around the sides, so make sure when you're unmolding it before you invert it that you go around the sides really well and make sure that they're sprayed or greased well too. So this goes in the oven, like I said, for about 35 to 45 minutes. And do we have any questions on anything so far? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and set that aside. And I've got a cake that I made earlier. Let's go ahead and check it out. So this is exactly how your olive oil cake is going to look when it's done. It's got a nice darker golden brown color to it. I had a little bit of sticking on the sides here, so make sure that you're oiling or greasing well the pan. Okay, so for finishing these cakes, you can do a variety of things. You can make a white icing and drizzle it on the top. You can put some zest in there, lemon if you like, or orange too. But I always like to finish my olive oil cakes with a little bit of orange marmalade. And this really works best if you put it on the cake when it's just a little bit warm, because it's going to spread a little bit more even. And what I do is I just cover the whole top with the orange marmalade, and then I kind of go around the sides a little bit. So please let me know if you have any questions. So the orange marmalade is just really going to kind of, as you can see, it brings the cake to life. It's going to add some really great flavor, and it's going to reinforce the orange flavor which is inside the cake. And like I said, these two herbs, the rosemary and the thyme, work super well with this cake. You won't be disappointed if you go ahead and put a little bit in. So when I say a little bit, I mean about maybe 1 teaspoon or maybe less, unless you want it strong. But if you're not sure, if it's something that you're just making for the first time, I definitely recommend just about 1 teaspoon, maybe just a little bit less. And when you're using the fresh herb, you're going to want to chop it up real fine. And then it's going to distribute in this cake really nice. And the herbs are lighter. They're kind of almost featherweight, so they're going to suspend in your cake just fine. You won't be disappointed if you put a little bit of herb in your cake. So we've got our marmalade on the top, putting some on the sides, and then we're just going to do a little plated dessert. We'll kind of give you a little bit of an idea how to present this cake. And we've got a question. The question is this cake as sweet as a regular cake? It sure is, even though it lends its name to the olive oil, which is typically used in the savory application. The cake is definitely sweet because in this small batch that we made for just an 8-inch cake, there's about 1.3 cups of sugar. So there's plenty of sugar. It's really nice. It's sweet. It's just going to be moisture from the olive oil, but not greasy, and it's just going to have a very distinct flavor to it. So let's go ahead and cut a piece. We're going to take a look at the inside of our cake, and then we're going to do a plate up presentation. And please let me know if you have any other questions, and please try the olive oil cake. You're going to love it. You won't be disappointed at all. So I'm just going to be cutting a slice. See how it looks on the inside here. It feels pretty moist. And like I said, please let me know if you have any questions. You'll be sure to dazzle your friends and family. What's super nice about a cake like this for the warmer weather, the summertime, is just about here is it doesn't need to be refrigerated. If you're having guests over, you can leave it out and you can serve it at room temperature because that's when it's at its best. So we've got a nice little wedge of cake here. We're going to go ahead and put it on our plate. So I'm just going to show you an individual plate up with this dessert. Let's go ahead and kind of move this over. So, as you can see, the cake just looks super moist on the inside. It's easy to handle. It's not doughy at all, and it's not greasy at all. It's just nice and moist. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of a plate up presentation. I've got some caramel sauce. So when you're pairing this cake up with some other flavors, if you're plating it or even if you're decorating it whole, just keep in mind the flavor that's in the inside. So I've got orange on the inside, or whether it's lemon or it's orange or lemon with herbs. Think of what's going to go with that orange. Like caramel goes really well with orange, and any of the berry fruits. So that's what we're going to be using today, and maybe we'll put a little bit of sliced orange on here to reinforce this orange flavor too. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. And we have another question.
How do you make the marmalade?
The question was?
How do you make the marmalade?
The question is how do you make the marmalade? Just a classic recipe with some orange peels, and you're going to boil it with some sugar and water. It's really easy to make. You can also make a lemon marmalade, and you could make a Meyer lemon marmalade too if you're interested in using the Meyer lemon. I highly recommend it. So it's super easy to make. I think a small batch, you're going to boil it for about 10 minutes. It's going to get real hot. You're going to want to cool that off before you use it for sure. So if you pour it on the cake, it's just going to go everywhere, especially if the cake is warm. So let's go ahead and put some orange slices on our plate with our cake. And please let me know if you have any questions. So this is a super easy cake to make. And you'll be sure to dazzle your friends and family. And like I said, it's a really good summertime favorite because they can sit out. It's got no pastry filling, nothing that's going to become squishy. It's a super nice cake to take maybe to a picnic or an afternoon or evening party that's outside, a barbecue. So let me know how you're doing with your olive oil cakes, and especially if you have any questions on them. So I just took the skin off my oranges, and we're just going to be putting a few slices on our plate here. Kind of do a little plate up presentation. Okay, we're just going to be kind of reinforcing that orange flavor a little bit. And let's go ahead and put a little bit of caramel sauce on here. This goes very nice with orange. We'll just kind of put a nice swirl. And maybe we'll put a dab of caramel over here. Okay. So I've got a little bit of strawberry here. I'm just going to cut this off. This is kind of a big one. Let's go ahead and put a few slices of strawberry on our cake too. And you can serve this cake in a restaurant that you're working in. It'll be very popular, I'm sure. Okay. So we've got a few more things to put on our presentation. I always like to serve a little bit of ice cream or sorbet with my plated desserts. So I've got a little bit of raspberry sorbet. So let's go ahead and put some of that on the plate. And I'm just going to do a small scoop. This is going to add some nice contrast to the plate. It's going to add some great flavor and some color as well. So just a small scoop, just kind of to accompany the dessert a little bit. Okay, and I've just got some cookies that I made. This is just a shortbread cookie that I cut in a long rectangle. And we're going to go ahead and just place this on our dessert. So it's looking pretty good for a super simple cake. And I picked up some dehydrated raspberries, which are always nice to put on the plate. So I'll put a couple of these around. They add some great flavor as well as a little bit of texture. And I've got some pistachio nuts too. It's going to add a little bit of nice green. Let's go ahead and sprinkle some of these on our plated dessert. So super easy dessert to make. You'll be sure to dazzle your friends and family with this. And we have another question.
Would you ever ice it like a regular cake?
The question is would you ever ice this cake like a regular cake? Absolutely. You could make a lemon icing or an orange icing. Be creative with your olive oil cake. It's one of these things, like a lot of our baking, that's limitless. You can put your own style, your own touch on things, so definitely try it. And what's nice too is if you're doing a little bit of thyme on your cake too, it's nice. You could put a little sprig of thyme on here or a little bit of rosemary too, and it's just going to add a little bit of freshness. So there you go. It's super easy dessert to make, and thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.